What's going on, guys? I'm sitting in the pool in Bali, and it's so nice to be in the tropics at the pool. And yes, in vlog time, we're still in Mongolia, and if you haven't seen those Mongolia vlogs, I think they're pretty fun. So go and check them out if you haven't seen them yet. In real time, in Bali, chilling at the pool. And it's Tuesday, and Tuesdays, as you know, are teaching days. I usually try to teach something. I don't want to teach today. I want to sit by the pool, and I want to talk cameras. There's been a bunch of new camera bodies that were launched in the past couple days, or I guess just announced the past couple days. Not only the 4 cameras from both Sony and Canon, but also a new Panasonic that was announced as well. So lots of really fun stuff when it comes to cameras and talking new camera bodies. That's exactly what I want to talk about today. Before I get into it though, I need to give a bit of a shout out to my next workshop. I've made another workshop announcement. We're gonna do a workshop in Arizona in January 2020. It should be awesome. It's with my buddy Michael Perea, who's a local. He knows all the hot spots and all the best spots and all the secret spots there. So that trip's gonna be amazing. There's info on the link in the bio, and I think that's the only announcement I need to make today. But there is a calendar also coming. Eventually, my calendar is going to come out, probably in a week or two. So keep your eyes out for that as well. Let's talk cameras. And before I get into this, I'm going to rant a little bit. That's going to happen. But I don't want anybody to think one of two things. I don't want you to think that any of these cameras are bad. Every one of these cameras announced is unreal. They're phenomenal cameras. The other thing I don't want you to think is that I'm anti-Sony. I'm not anti-Sony. I'm like pro-Sony. I think the Sony has just raised the bar for the whole industry. And even though I use Canon and I have some issues that keep me from shooting Sony, I love Sony and what they've done for the industry. They were massive. So, I'm not anti-Sony. Now, let's get into these cameras. There was 4 cameras that I want to talk about that were announced, and yes, I have notes. Because if I say things wrong, which I do all the time, you guys yell at me. And it hurts my feelings when you yell at me, so I don't want to say things wrong today. But there was 4 cameras. 2 Sony and 2 Canon cameras announced recently as of this week. Canon announced the 90D and the 6D Mark and the M6 Mark II. Sony announced the a6600 and the 6600. Those are the 4 cameras I want to talk about. I want to talk with Sony. I just kind of feel like at this point, Sony is just popping out cameras to fix minor issues, which is cool, I guess. But it's kind of left me a little bit underwhelmed with what they've released recently. Like, for example, the a7 III. I was expecting them to just blow our faces off. I was expecting the specs to come out and us to be like, oh, damn. But they were really kind of like underwhelming. And what I mean by underwhelming is I like to think about how I would feel if I owned the predecessor of that camera. Like, if I owned the a7 II and the a7 III came out, how would I feel? And what I mean by that is if the a7 III came out and that was the a7 II user, I would probably be like, I don't think I need to upgrade. When a new camera comes out, I kind of want it to blow me away to the point that whatever camera I'm using just doesn't feel adequate anymore. And that happened, in my opinion, with the a7 Mark III or the a7 III. I think it's the same situation with the a6600. I think that the updates were just a little bit underwhelming. So I guess let's get into those things. There was a lot of improvements to this camera, don't get me wrong. And they improved, I'm told, on 3 of the things that I find most the issue with Sony cameras in general. First of all, battery life. They've improved the battery life. They've put a Z series battery or a Z battery, I don't know something Z battery in it, which is supposed to give you double battery life. And I think it's not just the battery is better, they've also put in a new processor that's supposed to be much better. So apparently you get double battery life, which is phenomenal. They say that they've addressed the color issues. And yes, that's one of the huge things with me in terms of vlogging anyway, why I don't vlog on Sony, is the colors just don't look right to me. And don't get me started on what everybody always talks about. Oh, some YouTuber did a poll, and I don't know who the YouTuber was because I didn't say the video, so I'm not condescending them. Maybe it was Tony Northrup. I'm definitely not condescending Tony. I didn't see the video, didn't know who did it. What I'm saying, don't want beef. What I'm saying is, I don't care about a poll that went into public and showed people Sony, Canon, and Nikon images and said which one do you like best from a color standpoint, and that Sony won. People love fake colors. Look at the HDR trend from years ago. Look at Instagram filters. People love fake. I'm talking about when I shoot this on a Canon, this green here shows up on the video the same way my eye sees it, exactly the same. I'm telling you that when I owned the Sony 6300, and that was my main vlogging camera for a year, the sky that's blue right here that I'm guessing you can't see in this frame would have come out like a greenish teal color. I'm told on the 6600 that's been improved. I don't know how much. I haven't had the chance to test it. I hope I'll get the chance to test it, but I'm told it's been improved. The third thing I'm told that's been improved is the weather sealing, and I don't think it could get any worse than it was on the 6300. I had the 6300 for a year. I changed the lens a maximum 2 or 3 times, and somehow, at the end of the year, my sensor was still just covered in dust. And that should just not happen. So I'm told the weather sealing is better as well. The other thing that's been improved upon is the autofocus speed. Apparently, the autofocus speed is the fastest ever. It's unbelievably fast. So these are all great things. But I do think they missed out on some things that would have been big-time sellers. First of all, the sensor is 3 years old. They used the exact same sensor as they did on the 6500. And that sensor was really good. But you would have liked to see a better sensor. If you're an APS-C shooter, likely your biggest complaint or the thing that you want improved most in your camera is the low light capability. You want to be able to shoot at higher ISO. You want to be able to shoot better in low light situations. So by putting in that same 3-year-old sensor, it kind of sucks. It's like, that's the one thing I would have loved for an improvement on every single camera I've ever owned. On every single camera I've ever owned, if they said the low light capabilities are better, no matter what type of photography I shoot, I'm going, yes, that's great. And they didn't address it, so I feel like that was a bit of a fail. They didn't do 60 frames per second at 4K. And yes, I know that's nothing that, Canon doesn't do that. I know that. But Fuji does. And so when somebody goes into a shop and they've got the Fuji X-T3, the Sony a6600, and the Canon M6 Mark II, which we're going to talk about, lined up next to each other, and they're telling the guy at the counter or the girl at the counter, I want to shoot video, I want to do filmmaking. They're going to point out all the specs, and the specs on the Fuji from a basic 4K perspective are better. So in the shop, there's a good chance that person's going to pick Fuji. And Sony had the chance to equalize that or match that, I think, and they didn't. So that's a bit of a fail. They also didn't include like a fully properly rotating screen, which I love and can't live without. I could probably live without it, but I love it. And yeah, it would have been great to see them include that. I'm not going to talk about the 6100. Because the 6100 is essentially a watered-down version of the 6600. It doesn't have the faster processor, and it doesn't have in-body stabilization, which the 6600 does. So it's just a watered-down version of the camera. Also a great camera. Also a little bit underwhelming if you were shooting something like, I don't know, the 6300 before it. So that's it about Sony. That's it. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments what you guys think if you're going to be picking up one of these cameras. And more importantly, if you're going to be picking up one of these cameras, which camera were you shooting before that's led you to wanting to upgrade? That's my thought process. I mean, it's totally possible. You love the 6500. There's nothing that you'd change about it, but you've had it for 2 or 3 years. It's gotten old, so you're just going to upgrade to the 6600. I get that. You're smart. Carry on your business. Canon. I'm not off your back, Canon. In fact, I'm about to rag on Canon in a big way. Maybe not a big way, but a pretty big way. Canon is behind Sony, and with these 2 announcements, the 90D and the M6 Mark II, they're catching up. But I'm still going to rag on them for this reason. They launched the 90D, which is an APS-C DSLR camera. They launched an M6 Mark II, which is an APS-C mirrorless camera. But at the end of the day, they're the same camera. Just one has a mirror, and one is big and bulky and out of date, and the other one is new and fresh and sexy. So why release the 90D? In fact, I think the whole 90D series, that like 60, 70, 80, 90D series should be gone. Like, Canon should have just been like, we're done with you. And I get that Canon really wants that line because that line saved them. 2 or 3 years ago when every single vlogger in the world was using a 60 or a 70D to vlog, I think it probably saved Canon from complete collapse to Sony, which was totally taking over the market. or was at least pushing so hard into the market it was scaring Canon. That line saved Canon. So I get why they would want to like give people that use that line a next version, but it's outdated. Mirrors are the past. Mirrorless is the now. So get into the now and just kill this series altogether. In fact, the M6 Mark II is sexy. It is sexy. It's a beautiful looking camera that does a lot of things that Canon cameras, even like the full frame versions in the R series, haven't done yet. And here's the crazy part. So the 90D, let me check the prices. I can't remember. The 90D is about $1,300 or maybe $1,200, something like that. The M6 Mark II is like $850. So it's $250, $350 cheaper than the 90D. And if you're worried about, killing the 90D line, is people are going to be left with all these EFS and EF lenses that they can't use on the M series, include an adapter in the M6 Mark II, or at least include like an option for one, or give one away for free if people register their cameras with Canon. You should be pushing people onto this new system that's smaller, lighter, faster, and better. So I'm not going to talk about the 90D specs because they're basically the same as the M6 Mark II. I don't know why I keep messing that up. The M6 Mark II specs. But the specs are great on the M6 Mark II. It's really fast. The autofocus is really fast. It does 120 frames per second at full HD, which is the first time ever. Yes, it doesn't do 4K at 24 frames per second, which everybody's ragging on. I think that there's some issue there with patent law. There was an article about it on canonrivers.com the other day. I don't know the belief. I don't know the idea behind it. It does do 25 frames per second if you switch modes, so it gets close enough. But the specs look great. They're almost up to the Sony levels. And the camera looks great. It looks phenomenal. I shoot the RP right now because I shoot a lot of low light. I vlog a lot in low light. But if I wasn't in low light and I didn't have the RP, I think 100% the M6 Mark II would be my next vlogging camera. It looks that great. Still not perfect, but it's getting there. Canon's getting there. Let me look at my notes to see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about. The M6 has me excited about the next level of Canon. I want to call it the RX, like the pro version of the R series. I think one of my big hopes was to get 120 frames per second on that camera. And I think this launch has basically come out and said, that's going to happen. You're going to get that in that camera. So I'm excited about that. I think that's all I honestly want to talk about today. I do want to say this, as I said at the start, all of these cameras are amazing. And if 10 years ago Brendan could read the specs of the cameras we're now complaining about and ranting about now, he'd reach out into the future and punch me in the throat. This is the camera I had, the first ever professional camera I ever had, the first camera I used professionally. It was the Canon T1i, the Canon T1i. And these are the specs. It did 15 megapixels. It didn't do full HD video. It only did 720p. It could do 1080p video, but only at 20 frames per second. Its max ISO was 3200, but it was expandable to 6400. And I remember shooting this camera, I couldn't get above ISO 400 and really have usable files. That's kind of why I shoot long exposure now, because back then it was my only option was long exposure. The frame rate was 3.4 frames per second. That was the fastest shutter it could do. And that was only up to 9 raw files. So you could only hold that shutter down for 3 seconds and 9 photos. It was also the first ever DSLR. No, that's not true. The 50D was, I think. It was one of the first ever DSLRs to have live view. Before that, the camera before that, you had no live view. It was all just through the viewfinder. It's crazy that that was only 10 years ago. And the price of that camera when it came out in 2009 was $800, which is basically the same price as the M6 Mark II, which is crazy. I sold 2 years worth of photos on that camera. I worked for major magazines on that camera. I worked for major newspapers taking images on that camera. I still, to this day, have images in stock that I sold from shooting on that camera. Images I sold that were shot on that camera. I love Spec Talk. It pushes the brands, it drives the industry, but at the end of the day, take whatever camera you have, get out make pictures. Stop listening to talking heads like me. Get out there, pick up whatever camera you have and go make some pictures. And that's it for today's video. I gotta run. I'll see you later. Peace.